On St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 1985, my late wife and I were riding our Harley Davidson down Interstate 10 in New Orleans. And being St. Patrick's Day, and you have to have a parade. In New Orleans, if you drop your hat, you have to have a parade. And so the traffic was very congested. And as we approached an overpass that had been a part of the old highway system and should never have been incorporated into the interstate because it was too steep. It was just like an amusement ride, straight up and straight down. And the traffic was stopped on the other side of the overpass, but you couldn't see that because the parade was passing along the next exit. If you went to the right, the traffic was bumper to bumper and stopped in the right lane. The center lane could go right or left, and the left lane went to the left, away from the congestion. And just as we hit the bottom of the overpass, the cars at the top of the overpass, their brake lights came on and the tires started smoking because they're doing, the speed limit's 55, so they're doing 65, 70. And they get to the top of the overpass and the cars are at a dead stop. So a few of them ran into each other, and I was in the left-hand lane, wanting to go away from the congestion, but a car in the center lane had run right up on the bumper of a car in front of it, and just as I'm approaching, I see that their wheels are turning to the left. They want to get in that left lane that's wide open. And there's no shoulder on this overpass, and there's just a metal and concrete railing. And so there's no place to go. And as they say, that time went in slow motion there. And I only had a split second to decide, am I going to go ahead and hope that that car doesn't change lanes on me, or try to stop? And there really wasn't room to stop. So I downshifted the bike and gave it a gas and went all the way over to the left as far as I could. And thought we had made it. I could have tapped the lady on the head that was driving, but it was so close. Her bumper caught the tire itself. Another 2 inches and then we would have been by. But in the process of the car hitting us and going up against the railing there, my knees actually caved in the tanks on the bike. On the Harleys like that, you had 2 independent gas tanks, each with a separate filler cap. And in the process of trying to hold onto the bike and maintain control of it, my knees actually pushed the sides of the tank in and the gas caps popped off. And it never ruptured the tanks, the caps popped off. And so the gas was coming out and spewing over us, and the spark ignited it, and it must have been a heck of a show for the cars behind us. But I didn't even realize that there were 5% of you, 60% of it's third degree. You got a 10% chance of living, and no, you can't have any water. Oh, and that was that. She didn't pick any bones. And so she then proceeded to tell me that there was a good chance I would lose my right arm and my left leg, possibly my right eye, and the 10% chance that I would live. Not saying what kind of shape I'd be in if I did live. And all I wanted to do was make sure they understood that they were never to put me back in that tub again. And they said, oh, well, we have to. We have to. If we don't put you back in that tub, you're going to die. I said, good, you let me die, because I'm not going back in that tub again. And she said, said, oh, yes, we have to put you in that tub again. I said, no, you don't. You're not going to put me in there. I said, if you do put me in that tub again, and I do live, I'm going to come back and kill every one of you. And they just kind of snickered a little bit at that. And that they didn't tell me is that they were going to do it 2-3 times a week for the next 6 months. It's good they didn't tell me. And so the next few months were just surgery after surgery, mostly for skin grafts. And the 85% of me that was burned left just my chest pretty much, and my pelvis area. The air on a motorcycle when you're going interstate speeds swirls from the front to the back. And so that's why you don't see anyone wearing a button-up shirt on a motorcycle. That button come undone and that shirt will fly over your head and block your face. And so the back of me caught the worst of the burns. And I guess I must have landed on my face when I finally did come to a stop. And so between the 85% that was burned, that left just my feet and my head that was not burned. And a spot or two here or there, some on my abdomen. And so they proceeded to wrap me in artificial skin, shark skin, cadaver skin, and none of that would take. My body rejected all of it. The only thing it would accept was my own skin. So they shaved my head and took the skin off of my head. And anything as big as a postage stamp that they could find, they took as donor sites. So that left me with no skin, basically. The donor sites are equivalent to a second-degree burn. And it hurt. It was a long 4 or 5 months there. I was a little over 6 months altogether before I went home the first time. And about 4 or so months along, my internal organs all started shutting down because of the infection. And so, I'm sorry, I'm going to clear my thought here a second. It's still tough going back to that burn unit sometimes. So my thoughts were just, I want to just die. Let me die and get it over with. And of course they wouldn't. And when you're in a hospital, you don't have any constitutional rights. They're going to do what they're going to do, and then unless you have someone to speak up for you to tell them otherwise, they're going to fight every day to keep you alive. And my mother stayed with me the whole time I was there. Thanks to friends and family, she was able to stay every day with me. And she wasn't having any part of me checking out. No, you're going to live and you're not going to check out. And I said, oh, sorry, Mom, but I'm going to have to overrule you on this one. I'm out of here first chance I get. And so in order to escape that constant pain and torment, I fell back on things that I had read back in the late 60s, early 70s, things by psychics that were popular at the time, Arthur Ford, Ruth Montgomery, Edgar Casey, and read those things, it was just like, yeah, okay, if you say so, you know, I'll take it with a grain of salt, though. And so about 2 weeks along, I realized that this is going to go on, and I better find some way to deal with it. And so I told myself, I said, if any of this is real, this astral projection or remote viewing, things like that, I assume some of you are familiar with those practices. So I said, you know, this is a great time to find out if I can do it or not, because this body hurts and I'm going to get out of it if I possibly can. And so that's what I did. And first I just willed myself to just be out of the body, just out anywhere. And at first I told myself I'd go out into space. I'd always been fascinated with pictures of deep space. And I thought, well, heaven's up there somewhere, so I'm going to go look for it. And it was fascinating, and at first I thought I was dreaming, but I would be out in space and no reference points, no idea where Earth was or where I was, except out in space. Everywhere you looked around was the same, you know, there was no planet Earth or anything. And of course, when I would wake up again after one of those trips, my mother and some of the doctors and nurses would think that I was just hallucinating, that my mind hadn't really left my body, I hadn't gone anywhere. And after a few weeks, I got better at it, and I was able to pick a destination. And I was very fortunate in that I had read the books on astral projection and remote viewing and such, because it enabled me to focus my thoughts more on where I wanted to go and to find some way of having some control over what was happening. And I remembered reading one of the descriptions that Edgar Cayce gave about when they would leave the earth realm, this heavy realm that we're in here, and as he would rise up, I would describe it as if you had a tall glass cylinder, clear glass, and you filled it with water and just dirt and such, and shook it up, and it'll be all just murky and cloudy. And if you give it time, it'll settle, and the heavy things will settle to the bottom, and the higher up you go in that vessel, the clearer things will get. And that was how it looked when I first started out. It was like there was this vertical shaft that I was in the center of, and as I looked out around me, I could see other, what I thought were people at the time, and it was hard to comprehend just the reality of it. And then as I went further up, the things got clear, and I could see these other souls, and they looked just like me or you. They had, if you got past their face, sometimes it was just faces. Other times it was the entire body, and they would project themselves to however they saw themselves, that thought form that they projected is how I would see them. And so that was kind of a transitional period there, a space, if you will. Once I got to that clear level, then I could see other souls, other beings. And well, let's see if I can pick a few examples of things that happened. One time I was at the entrance to a cave, and the soul that stood in the entrance there was beckoning me in, come see something. And so I followed him into the opening of the cave there, and there were little niches carved out on the sides, and there was just a light glowing there. And as we went further in, it started to go deeper and getting darker. And then he stopped and he pointed to what looked like a picture window, and it was like a motion picture being shown inside that picture window, and there were people doing various things. And I thought, well, okay, that's interesting. And then he had me go a little further, and there was another picture window like that, and 3 or 4 people doing various things. And we went on to the next one, and now there's a room with 3 nude women in it, and on a bed. And I said, what is this? He's showing me. And I said, let's go on that one. That one looks interesting, man. Let's see what's going on over there. And he said, no, you can't do that. You can only watch. You can only watch what they're doing. And I said, well, that's no fun. That's kind of boring. And he kept enticing me to come further down this cave. And something, intuition, whatever it was, told me this is not right. Something is not right with this. And when I looked back to see where the entrance was, it was far away and going upward. And I got this terrible vibe from this guy. And I said, no, I'm not going any further. This is not good. And at that moment, the way he was projecting himself changed completely. And he took the shape of one of these creatures, if you will, almost like those paintings you see of the devil from the 1400s or 1200s, things like that. And that got my attention big time. And I said, no, I'm out of here. And I immediately called on Christ. I said, Christ, bring me back to my body. I don't like this. And at that point, I woke up back in my room. And I wasn't in my body yet, but I was back in the room. And then I woke up in my body. And so I had a number of experiences like that. And
why don't you tell them about going back home to your trailer?
Yes, as time went on and I learned to control this better, I had reached a point where I could channel it enough that I could go home and lay in my bed in my bedroom and see what was going on back at home. And I remember one time especially clear that my mother was standing over me, and she was startled because I wouldn't wake up. And she said, "Oh, you scared me. I've been trying to wake you up, and I was getting ready to call the nurse." And I said, "Oh, Mom, it's because I was back home laying in my bed. I wanted out of here for a while." And she used to laugh, and it'd make me, I'd get so irritated with her because I'm all excited and telling her that I was at home and I was laying in my bed and this is going on and that's going on. And she just laughed like, "Oh, you're so silly. You haven't been anywhere. You're right here." And so one time I decided that I had to convince her. And so this particular time, both of my brothers were staying out there. I had 10 acres out in the woods and a couple of trailers, and they were holding down the fort while Mom and I were away. And so on this occasion, I decided to follow my brother and see where he was going to go. I'd gotten proficient enough at this that I could tag along with him at this point. And so I followed him over to a friend's house where they were working on his pickup truck. And he had my brand new engine analyzer. And they were setting the timing on the truck. And I'm looking over his shoulder, and he has this plastic clip that goes over one of the wires that's sitting on the exhaust manifold, and it's melting. And I'm hollering at him, "You're messing up my analyzer, man. Get that off of the exhaust." And of course he can't hear me. And so I just stood there and watched what they were doing. And when I got back into the hospital again and woke up, I told my mom, I said, "Call home and tell Kenny," that's my brother's name, I said that he owes me a clip for that engine analyzer. And she laughed and she thought I was out to lunch. And but eventually she did call. I persisted, and she did call. And then she started not believing, but maybe there's something here. And so another time I went back to that friend's house, and he lived in a very historic part of the New Orleans area there, about 30 miles north of New Orleans. And it used to be a very busy cypress logging camp there. And there was an old boat shed that was probably 100 years old or so, barely surviving all the hurricanes and such, pretty dilapidated. And something drew me in there, and when I went into this old building, there were 2 or 3 souls in there that were earthbound and had been there for a long time. I never did find out exactly how long, but they were very anxious to know what the date was, what year it was, who I was. They wanted me to know who they were. And just like meeting one of you here, they looked the same, they had the same consciousness. And let's see if I can remember another occasion here.
I'm going to start with when you were in bed and they thought you were going to die that night.
No,
That's the mean
that's
part.
To this point in my experiences, they're still telling me that I'm going to live, and that they're not saying what kind of shape I'd be in, but I still had that 10% chance of living. And
did you see any bright lights?
About to.
He's getting to that part now.
And So, if I'm conscious in this body at this time, my thought is, let me die, let me out of here. This body hurts. And so one evening, and I don't know it's evening because I know the nurse's routines, and I had been asleep, and when I woke up, I find that I'm out of my body, and I see, in order to enter my room, you had to put on full surgical gown, the gown, the hood, the mask, the gloves, the booties, everything to just enter the room. And so I see these 7 gowns, as I would call them, and it got my curiosity, and I said, well, okay, what am I seeing now? Am I dreaming? Sometimes it was hard to differentiate between dreaming and actually experiencing something. And so I'm paying close attention to what's going on so I can figure out if I'm dreaming or not. And after a few minutes, the gown at the foot of the bed turns away, and I can see who's in the bed, and there's this monster-looking body. It's purple and green and swollen and blood all over, and I thought, oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. And I would call to Christ and say, Christ, bring me back. I don't like this. I don't want to be here. Before I could say that, another gown turned around, and I recognized my mother. And I said, what's Mom doing in this vision or dream? And then another gown turned around, and I recognized the head doctor. And I realized that's me in the bed. That monster I'm seeing is me. And a light went off, and I realized, wait a minute, if that's me down there, and I'm up here on the ceiling, and I don't have any pain. In fact, I feel okay. And it dawned on me that I'm out of my body at last. I'm finally out of my body, and this nightmare can end. And the other gowns on either side of the bed were other doctors and students and such that had been tagging along with the head doctor. And they left the room, leaving just my mother and the head doctor. And I'm listening to him, and it just as clearly as hear you hear, he's saying, Don's not going to make it through the night. His organs are all shutting down. He's got sepsis and just a blood infection. And so I listened to him tell my mother that she needs to go back to her room and get some rest. It's getting late. And to come back in the morning, and she said, there's no way he's going to make it through the night. So you come back in the morning, and I'll have the social worker meet with you and make arrangements to have his body sent home. She said, but there's nothing else you can do, so there's no reason to stay here any longer. And of course, my mom started crying and all. And they left the room and left me there floating on the ceiling. And I thought, well, wow, this is an occasion, you know, I don't die every day. I guess I should make this an event or something. Maybe want to remember this, you know, the next life or something. And so I said the Lord's Prayer, and I said prayer for my mom and my brothers and sisters, and loved ones and such, until I just ran out of people to pray for. And so, hell, maybe I'll say 1 or 2 for me. I thought, okay, we'll do that. And then I waited, and nothing happened. And I kind of pacing around on the ceiling up there, saying, okay, let's get this show on the road, man. Let's do something here. Nothing happened. And I thought, oh, okay, what am I going to do now? How do I speed this process up. And something told me to look up. And when I did, there's this hole through the ceiling tiles like this, just like this, but it's clean through the building and out into space. And I thought, wow, now that's cool. I just see stars and such. It was transparent, and yet there was light in it. And the best way I can describe it is if you took a cardboard tube from a roll of paper towel, and on a bright blue day like this, if you tried to look directly at the sun, you can't do it. You can only get that light to the edge of the tube of light there, the tube you're looking through, because it's just too bright. And that's how this tunnel looked. There was blue sky at the end, and this really bright light that I couldn't look directly at. And as I'm staring at this tunnel, it was like Star Trek in a tractor beam. It felt magnetic, and it was drawing me up into this tunnel. And I felt myself go through the building and out into, I want to say the atmosphere or the air, but I'm still in this tunnel of light. And the further I went, the faster it went, until I was zooming along. Just everything is flashing by really quick. And as I look back down into my room, I can still see my body back there, but it's real tiny, far away. And I got the impression that I was halfway to wherever I was going. Like there was an equal distance between my body and that bright light. And fairly quick, not instantaneous, but fairly quick, someone put the brakes on, and I came to a stop. And I'm just floating in space in this. Now the tunnel has gotten huge. It's no longer just a little small tunnel. And it felt like as if I was maybe in the size of this room. And I'm just floating there. And I can see my body. I don't remember being clothed. But if I look at my hands, I can see them. And in an instant, bang, there's three beings there. And they have the gowns like you see a monk wear, with the long sleeves that hang down and the hood that comes up. And they look like they're woven with silk. Like they're woven with the fineness of silk, but it's silver, like the metal silver. And they're each looking downward. And as they lift their heads up, they looked identical, but they only had vague features. I'd best describe it, if you've ever seen the special effects they do in Hollywood, where they take the sheet of vinyl and they stretch it against their faces, and you only see the outlines of their eyes and their nose and their mouth. And each one was identical. And no hands sticking out of the robes and no feet. And I thought, well, this is cool. Okay, I wonder who these people are. And I'm just floating along and taking it all in. And when one of them went to speak, it was all three of them spoke in unison. And they were in harmony. And it had a slight echo effect to it. And they said, as I started to say something to them, they spoke first, and they said, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm dead. Oh, that's what I was telling them. I'm dead. I'm finally dead. You know, oh, thank goodness. I don't have any pain. In fact, I feel good. This is all right. This is going to be fun. And in unison, they said, you're not dead, Don. Just that. And I looked around and see where that came from. And I realized it's them. I said, did you say that? And he said, again in unison, you're not dead, Don. Just as serious as can be. And I said, look, I don't know who you are, but I'm in this tunnel talking to you, and my body's down there. I said, now, that's dead. And they laughed in unison, and ha ha ha. You're not dead, Don. Okay. I said, I don't know who you are, but you don't know shit. You don't know anything. What are you doing here? You don't mean I'm not dead. I am dead. My body's down there. I'm up here. And they laughed. And I said, you're not dead, Don, and you're not going to die. And I said, oh, okay. Look, I don't know who you guys are, but y'all don't know shit. You don't know anything. I'm dead, man. I'm in this tunnel with you. I said, now, call your boss. I said, get your boss up here, because you don't know anything. And again, they laughed. And the more they would laugh, the angrier I would get. And the angrier I would get, the more they would laugh. And so finally, it seemed like, this went on for 5 or 10 minutes. And I said, I don't know who you are, and I don't know why you keep telling me I have to go back, but I'm not going. No, they're not. I wasn't going to die. I said, don't tell me I'm not dead. I am dead, and you don't know what you're talking about. And so I said, look, get your boss. I don't know who you are, but get your boss. Get someone here who knows what's going on. And they said, Don, you have to go back. I said, no, not going back. That's not going to happen. I said, and then I got angry. And I said, that body hurts. And I'm not going back in that body, and you can't make me. I said, no, I was created with free will, and I'm exercising it right now. I said, I'm not going back in that body, and there's no way you can make me. And they were persistent. You have to go back. I said, no, I don't. I don't have to do anything. I said, you want me to go back in that body? You bring Christ here, and you have Christ tell me to go back in that body, because that's the only way I'm going back in that body. And bang, in an instant, there was Christ. And he had on a gold robe, similar to theirs, with a gold sash, and the hood back. And he looked just like the pictures in the Bible. And whether that's the way I expected him to look is why he looked that way, I don't know, but that's how he looked to me. And as soon as that vision popped in, that energy hit me, and it was like a wall. It was so overwhelming. And if there had been a floor, I would have dropped on it, but I just dropped to his feet, and I could see my tears bouncing on his feet and wetting his feet, and I was just bawling like a baby. And a few moments passed, and he reached down and touched my shoulder. He said, be still, Don. And I kind of floated up to an upward position to where I was standing upright, and touched my shoulder again, and said, now, be still. And I could feel all of that emotion just drain out of me, like it went out the bottom of my feet, and I quit bawling, and it was just so overwhelmed, just just pure love radiating, almost like I couldn't breathe. It was so overwhelming. And agreed that this would happen. And you agreed that you would go back. And I looked at him and I said, oh, okay, I changed my mind. And he laughed and he said, well, you can do that. You can change your mind. He said, but before you do, he said, let me show you something. And he took off and took me with him. And we zoomed through those stars, and I found myself walking to his left. He was on my right, and we were walking down a footpath in an arid area that looked like the Holy Land, you know, lots of rocks and very little vegetation. And there are some other people. They're dressed like during the time of Christ. And when I looked over my shoulder and looked behind us, there was a whole multitude of people. And that was when I had told Christ that and agreed that this would happen. And so he brought me back, and I could hear him talking just like standing here. And we walked on for a ways, and sadly I've forgotten what our conversation was over the years. That's escaped me. But we walked on for a ways, and then boom, we're back in that tunnel again. And he says, now you can change your mind if you want to, but if you will go back, you could help a lot of people. And I don't know about y'all, but I can't tell Christ no, and certainly not when you're in his presence. And so I started bawling again like a baby. I don't want to go back. Her body hurts. And I said, if you want me to go back, I'll go back. I don't want to go back, but if you want me to go back, I'll go back. I said, but if you want me to live, you're going to have to make me live. I said, because I've had it. I can't do anymore. I'm tired, man. I said, that body's worn me out. I said, you want me to live, you're going to have to make me live. And he laughed and he said, I created you. I can make you live. And boom, he was gone. And those three beings were still there. They said, looked at me and they said, you? And I said, I know. I have to go back. I know. Just give me a minute, man. Chill out. And a little few moments passed and they said, you have to go back. I said, I know, I got it, man. Be calm, man. Let me get my wits about me here. And in unison, the three of them said, you have to go back and threw your arm down that tunnel like that. Now! And when I followed their arms across, boom, back down the tunnel. And picked up speed, came through the ceiling in the room and put the brakes on. And I'm kind of floating about like this. And came to a stop, floated over the bed, and then tilted backward and took the position of my physical body. Ankle turned just like the ankle was, the hand, everything, and slowly lowered down until I was just above the body. And then in one instant, wham! And I got someone slammed a big steel door and just wham, the loudest noise and pushed back in that body. And I went out. And the next thing I knew, there was a nurse, and it was morning, come to find out, and there was a nurse trying to take blood. And my body had shriveled up so much, I weighed like 90 pounds then, down from like 180. And they had to actually cut my veins out of my body in order to draw blood and such. Like needles in my head, and my ankles. And of course, you can't get a vein and it's hurting. Hell of a way to wake up after that trip. And so I could barely move, but I could move that arm just enough to stop her from getting that vein. Because I can't die. She doesn't need the blood. What the hell, leave me alone. And she got angry, and I saw there's 7 vials on my abdomen there, on top of the blankets. She's gonna do this 7 times. And I thought, oh, no, you're not. And so I would move that arm just enough that she couldn't get that vein. And she got angry and stomped out the room. And of course, she had put all that surgical garb on to come in the room. No wonder she was angry. In 20 seconds, that head doctor was in the room, already gowned out and everything. And he said, Don, what's the matter? What's the matter? Why are you giving the nurse a hard time? I said, look, doctor, I'm tired. I said, no, you know, last night I was floating on that ceiling listening to you tell my mom I wasn't going to live. I said, and then I went up that tunnel, and these beings told me I had to come back, and then Christ asked me to come back. I said, you know, I'm tired. It was a long night. And he said, I believe you, Don. He said, I believe everything you're saying. And the door was still ajar a little bit, so he reached over with his leg and took his foot and bumped the door shut. And he said, Don, he said, last night your body chemistry was so out of whack that the highs went off the paper on one side and the lows went off the paper on the other side, and all we got was a blank piece of paper when we tried to run your body work, your blood work. And he said, now, this morning, I just ran it a few minutes ago, and it's just a tad away from being perfectly normal. He said, that can't happen. He said, but it did. And so, yes, I don't have any problem believing what you're telling me. He said, but we need to find out what happened. And he said, we need that blood. We might be able to help somebody else if we can figure out what's going on here. I said, well, all right, if you put it like that, okay. Take your dang blood. I said, but you need all 7, man. Can't you just take a few? And so they got their blood, and I was still extremely sick. And that evening, again, I know I was evening because my mother had to leave. At 9 o'clock, she'd have to leave. And during that time, there's these rooms in the burn unit are tiny. They're just from here to that camera square, just enough room to walk around a bed. And that's it, that's all that's in that room, except for equipment. And there's a big picture window at the foot of the bed and a desk, and the nurse, your nurse, sits at that desk when she's not in the room. There's always someone there watching. And so that night passes and I think I'm dreaming. But instead of going up in the stars and such, I'm down in the basement of the hospital. And there are these little fairies, just like Tinkerbell. You know, they're not this big, and they're floating all around my bed, and my bed is down in the basement. And I used to be an industrial electrician, and I've been in plenty of those basements and hospitals and other high-rise buildings and such. I know what they look like. And these fairies are just fluttering all around me. And there are 4 different types. Some would look like Tinkerbell. Some look more like a butterfly. And they would hover around me, healing my astral body. And so the next morning, my mom woke me up when she came in, and I was really sick and feeling bad. And I said, Mom, take me downstairs to my other room. I said, I always feel so much better when I come back from there. And of course she laughed. You don't have another room. I said, yeah, Mom, the one downstairs. Take me down to that one. I always feel better down there. And she just laughed. I don't know how my mom put up with it. I would get so annoyed with her. You know, that people just didn't understand about that other room down there in the basement. And so this episode repeated itself at night when everything was quiet and people were still, is when it would happen. And let me get my place here. And so I proceeded to get well really quick, amazingly quick. Didn't lose my arm, I didn't lose my leg, and I still got the eye. And I managed to deal with that pain. And this particular hospital, they only had, I think it was 11 beds in the burn unit. And one of them was a man that was a fundamentalist preacher who lived in Texas there. And he had worked for Frito-Lay and had slipped on a catwalk and plunged his arms in a vat of hot oil. And so he wasn't burned as badly as me, but he was seriously burned, both arms and up under his neck and his chest. And so you have a certain rapport with other patients because they're the only ones that really know what it's like. And my mother used to go over in his room and feed him and help the nurses take care of him because his wife had to stay at home with their children. And he was only there for a few weeks, only, right? And when he left, my mother had been telling him about me, and he knew I was a believer, Christian. And so he asked if he could come see me when he was getting discharged, the day he was getting discharged. And I agreed. And he came in and introduced himself and such. And he said, Don, I know the pain you're going through. He said, believe me, I know. And I said, oh, I know you do. And he said, well, you know, you don't have to suffer all that pain. He said, when the pain gets so bad that you can't take it anymore, he said, you got to take what you can take. But when you can't take it anymore, when you just have had it, then I want you to say this. Just say this. Jesus, take my pain. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Just say that. And just say it over and over and keep saying it. And Christ will take that pain upon himself. And you won't have to feel it. He said, but you have to take what you can take. You know, don't just call on him the first time you got a little bobo. And I wanted to believe him, and still there was a little bit of skeptic in me. After all this, there's still a little skeptic in me. And I said, well, we'll try it and see. That's all I can say. And turns out it was perfect timing because the physical therapist was coming in the room. And they had a big table, a chair that would fold out on the table. Joan's laughing because she's a physical therapist. And the poor therapist get called some names. But where you have grafts are not too bad. All the nerves are dead. The surface nerves anyhow. There's no sweat glands, there's no oil glands, there's no hair glands. And you only have top 2 layers as opposed to the 7 layers of deep, healthy skin. Under my armpits where I'm not burned, that good, healthy skin meets the grafted skin. and the grafted skin shrinks. And so this arm, I could only move it out like that. I could only bend that elbow that little bit. The same thing on this side. Because when they shrink, they pull it back against your body. And this therapist would take sheets and tie me to this big, heavy oaken table. And then put one arm on the shoulder and grab the wrist here and physically pull that arm back and rip that skin out. They can't cut it because it'll make more scar tissue. And it hurt big time. I would scream and pull back against her till the foot of that table would come off the floor. And so as she's tying me, I'm thinking to myself, this is a good time to try this Jesus take my pain trick. And as she comes around and is standing at the head of the bed looking down on me, her tears are falling in my face. She's crying because she knows how much she's going to hurt me here momentarily. And I just closed my eyes and said, Jesus, take my pain, Jesus, take my pain. I just kept saying it. And the next thing I knew, she was taking the sheets off. And she said, Don, what did you do? And I said, what? I was like I was waking up from a really deep sleep. She said, I didn't do anything. I just laying there. She said, that's it. That's what I mean. You didn't do anything. You didn't fight me. She said, you let that arm go right back. And I said, oh, well, that other patient was telling me to say, Jesus, take my pain. She said, well, keep doing it because it worked. And to this day, it works. Not until I take what I can take. But when it's totally overpowering and you can't take any more, for me, it works. That's all I can say. And so with the help of that little prayer, I made it out of there and went back to my empty bedroom. Missed my wife something terrible, and I never, got to tell her goodbye or anything. Everything happened so quick. And because of family members that had to move in with us, this wreck happened on a Sunday. The next day, we were scheduled to move a 3-bedroom trailer out for my mother and my niece and nephew, one of my brother's children. And so she gave up her apartment that Sunday, that same day. And all her belongings were in a U-Haul. And we were all in just my trailer. So I'm in a little single bed in a little tiny room in that trailer. And with the AC running wide open because my body can't cool itself because of all the skin grafts. There are no sweat glands in those grafts, and so I get overheated really easily. And for weeks, I just laid in that room, only getting out of bed to shower, and it would take 3 people to put me in the shower and get me out and dry me off, and you have these stretch garments that you have to wear to keep the scarring down and such, and it's just really torturous. And after a few weeks of being home the first time, I got really depressed, just this really deep depression, and I couldn't figure out why. I mean, okay, I know, I lost my business, lost my wife, things hurt, but this is deeper than that. This is something else. I know I lost all that, but there's something else I lost, and I don't know what that is. And so I called on Christ again. I said, Christ, what, I asked you to take my pain, my physical pain, but what about this depression? Why am I so depressed? And the thought just popped in my head like a light bulb. it was because I'd lost that connection that I had with Christ when I was in that hospital bed. And I could say, Jesus, take my pain, and boom, it'd go. And now I'm having to wonder about finding a doctor back in Louisiana and paying the bills and providing as much as I can for the family and all the madness that has happened for the last 7 months. And it's distracting me from that one-on-one connection I had with the Christ. And that's why I was so depressed. And I wanted that back. And it took some time, but it came back. And it would come and go for times there. But when life is really dragging you down, you'll find that connection. It's there. With me, the day-to-day living distracted from it, and then I lost that oneness with it. But when I can still myself, I can discover that again. It's still there. I just need to find it sometimes. And so, I've read other books and talked with other people that had out-of-body experiences. And Joan and I had a few meetings with Ions at our home years ago. And there was one lady that's memorable. She had an out-of-body experience. And when another person would say they had one, she'd immediately want to know, you have any brain damage? She says, if you don't have brain damage, you didn't have a out-of-body experience. And we would get in some interesting conversations over that. And I told her, yes, I do have brain damage. You can trust me. And you do have any traumatic experience like that. I had to learn to dial a telephone again. I couldn't repeat the numbers. 775. It's a learning process all over again. But along with that came so many blessings. There was one lady in the little town that was the closest town to where we lived. Like the neighbors would say, we lived in as far in the woods as you could get, because if you went any further, you were coming back out. And about 12 miles to the nearest little town, they had a convenience store, gas station there. And when I first came home from Texas the first time, I couldn't wear clothes because you couldn't put them on. My mom had gotten an elastic terry cloth skirt to wrap around me, and then a hospital smock because on my back was still, most of my back was still open, had never been drafted yet. But they had to get me out of the hospital because I had sepsis. That's that blood infection. And the only way to get rid of it is to get out of the hospital. So they sent me home with just big, bare places where there was no skin. And of course it would bleed through the smock. And I was going 3 times a week to a little hospital not too far from home for physical therapy, occupational therapy, hands. And so we would stop in there on the way back home and grab a sandwich or something. And this lady that worked the register, the first time she saw me, and she asked me, what happened? And I told her, she just bursted into tears. And every time I saw her, the same thing. She'd just burst into tears and run out of the store, run in the back, so she didn't have to see me. And that was the first time I felt such compassion from a total stranger. This lady just was so compassionate. She couldn't stand it. Just seeing me hurt like that made her hurt. And I realized that if this hadn't happened to me, I might have never experienced compassion like that from a total stranger. And so many experiences in the years since that. This was back in '85, so I've been dragging this body around for 35 years now. This body, as opposed to the one that I had before it got burned. And there are so many blessings like that that I've been fortunate enough to experience that I never could have experienced any other way. And I've had a lot of people that know me that when they lose a loved one or something, they'll ask me, like everyone, how do you deal with it? Does it ever get better? Things like that. And so I've been blessed with experiences like that. And then I've had some experiences that were almost out of this world. Let's see, I want to say about 5 months after I came home from Texas the first time. It was, I think it was either late January or early February. It was extremely cold, below freezing, and Halley's Comet was passing over the United States. And I had seen it back in 69, 70, 71, something like that. And I wanted to see it again. And 2:30 in the morning was to be the best viewing time. And so I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and I had started writing just with a pen and paper notes for this book I want to finish. And as I'm sitting there, my brother came home. He was tending bar, and they shut down at 2. So he got home about 2:30, and he was drunk, and he just wanted to pass out on the sofa. And I was trying to get him to go outside with me to look for the comet, because I was still having trouble walking, and of course it's cold out. I didn't want to fall down and not be able to get back up. And so he went and crashed on the sofa, and I went out on the deck there and turned and closed the door, and I saw something over my shoulder, and I looked back there, and there was looked like a campfire out in the woods. And I had 10 acres that I kept cleared, so it's not wild woods, with all the underbrush and all. And I thought, who the hell is out there on a cold night like this, camping with a campfire in my yard? And I just thought it was so strange. And then as I stared at it for a little while, I realized that fire's not on the ground. It's up. It was really dark out, but it was a clear night, and all the stars were showing, and so I could make out the ground, and I could make out the tops of the trees, and this was halfway. And as I stared at it, it got bigger. And from where I was standing, it looked, in my field of vision, it was like so big, maybe a basketball. And as I stood there staring at it, it started getting bigger, and it started pulsing. And it was making a noise. It was going, whoom, 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 and getting bigger, and then dripping down like molten steel. And I was startled, needless to say. I backed up against the door, and I made a mark off the corner post on the deck there so I could find that spot again in the morning. Because I'm still thinking that's a fire out there, like a campfire. And no needs to say the next morning that there was no campfire. That was an energy fire, if you will. I've since read of other people having, like Moses in the burning bush kind of thing. It's energy that someone is focusing for your benefit. And so I've experienced things like that. I went through a period where I really missed my wife, and I hadn't even had a dream with her in it. And I woke up one morning in the middle of a dream with her in it. And she was floating like in that tunnel. And she was singing to me. And then she was saying, "If you will think of me, then I will be with you. So always think of me. in everything you do, and on like that. And I felt so good having had that dream. That evening, just before dark, I walked over to a neighbor trailer, and I had sold an acre to a friend's mother. He had died a couple of years earlier, and I moved her out there so we could care for her. And she missed him, and so I told her that I had this dream with my wife in it. And she said, "I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a minute. I miss Billy terrible, and I never had a dream with him in it." "Oh, you're full of shit. You're full of shit. There ain't no such thing." I thought, wow, that's not what I expected. Okay, so maybe I am crazy. I won't tell her again. And by now it's dark outside, so I have to be careful walking in the gravel of the driveway. It's a good block away from trailer to trailer. And I'm kind of looking at the ground, shuffling my feet to make sure I don't fall. And something told me to look up. And I looked up, and a shooting star went from horizon to horizon. And I could hear it all the way across. And as I'm staring at it there in the driveway, I heard that song again. "If you will think of me, then I will be with you." And I just started crying, and I felt so good. And so I've been blessed with other experiences like that. Sometimes I still have a nice dream. Had a nice one with my brother this morning. And so it's not all pain and agony and things that you wouldn't want to experience. There's plenty of blessings that go along with it. And I'm sorry I haven't been more coherent with this talk today. It's just not flowing like it usually does.
Have you found that your intuition has been enhanced by all of this? You feel you just maybe know things that you never knew before?
Well, I've learned to pay attention to it.
Okay.
Where before I thought it was just my imagination. You know, I've learned to pay attention to it. I had a dream a month or so ago to play the lottery. I did and didn't win $1. So I don't believe every intuition is right, but yeah, sometimes things like that pop up. And things that I would have ignored in the past, you know, like picking up on a person's vibes or their energies or something that I would have thought was just my imagination. Now I know to pay attention to it, that there is something there. And
You might want to adjust your hearing aids.
you know, boy, take care of your hearing. You don't want hearing aids. This is from the antibiotics caused my hearing to fail. And so anyhow, if you heard that, that's not my bionic brain. That's hearing aid. I told a lady one time checking out at the grocery store, the hearing aid started squawking like that. That's my big toe off my left foot on the hand, and the lady at the register knew that. And so on this particular day, she heard that hearing aid going off, and I said, "Oh, let me fix that. That's my bionic brain. Let me turn that down." And I reached up there, and it stopped, and I said, "Wow!" So, yeah, there are a few moments that I can still laugh about. And Dick likes my story about my toe on my hand, and I'd never be without a beer and go in any bar and bet someone I can pick my nose with my toe. Anyhow, does anybody have any other questions? I'm so off track today.
Do you still practice astral projection or out-of-body travel?
Can I still do it?
Do you still do it? Yeah.
I can, but not as easily. For me, it's like I'm terrible at meditating. And Jonah telling they can meditate in a drop of a hat. But me, I have to concentrate so much that I'm not meditating now. I'm thinking about meditating, you know. But sometimes I can, mostly in my sleep. I mean, not my sleep, that fine line between consciousness and sleep, then I can slip in there. And I was talking about that time my astral body came back in my physical body, and I felt that steel door slam. For months after that trip up the tunnel, my heart would stop beating. And, you know, the monitor's right there so you can watch it. And I'd be laying there on my back most of the time, sometimes on my face. And my body would just, boom, just jolt like that. And actually leave the bed by an inch or two. Just one big jolt. And I would see that line go flat. And then just long enough for the alarm to go off and the nurse to come running, and then it'd start up again. And when it would start up, then that wham, that steel door would hit again. And that still happens. I'll be laying in my easy chair watching television, and just whoop, this arm will go off, or this one will go off, the leg will jump up, and then heart will go back to beating again. And so I have some side effects like that, but the reason I mention those periods is because that's when that happens, when I reach that state where I'm really relaxed, and then I'll drift off, and I can travel around. But nothing is as clear as that time up in the tunnel. That was definitely a league all its own.
How old were you when the accident happened?
I'm sorry?
How old were you when the accident?
33. Well, 32, I was 2 weeks away from my birthday. No, a month away from turning 33. And
the person in you, before your accident, and now, much longer after your accident, do you have anything to say about yourself in terms of how you have changed as a person, as an entity?
yes, I'm not the same person.
What's going on?
I'm a lot more patient with people. I'll jump off, but then I can catch myself. You know, like, don't be so quick to call someone a name in traffic or something. And of course, I'm much more receptive to things like out-of-body experiences and spiritual experiences.
Spiritually, has your journey been really, really good for you in all?
Oh yeah, it's I won't even attempt to describe it. What it's like to, when I'm having a bad day, and this body's really aching or hurting, and just not smiling a lot. I remind myself that what it felt like to have Christ appear in that tunnel of light, and how overwhelming that was, and how it's right there for the taking, you know, and it's the only thing that's keeping me from experiencing that again is me. You know, it's there, and it's always there. I'm the one that has to reconnect with that. I've had 6 surgeries in the last 8 years, and each time, you know, each hand, each knee, and you always wonder, like especially with the skin grafts, you know, I hope they take, because if not, you're going to lose that hand. You could lose it. And I just go with the flow now. I mean, you know, Christ kept me alive this long. No reason to believe he won't now. And if I drop dead in 10 minutes, then it's my time. But you know, I could a point to tell people, so you can't add a day to your life, but you can't take one away either. And so think of that before you go do something dumb, you know. Because we all have our destinies and our things in life we're to experience and to fulfill. And sometimes Joan gets impatient with me because she knows I'll check out in a heartbeat. She's the only thing keeping me here. And sometimes she'll come right out and ask me, "You're not thinking of checking out today, are you?" No, I'm not trying to check out. I'm not hurrying it along, but I certainly am not afraid of it.
I understand.
In fact, I do look forward to it. You know, it's a wonderful journey. But I got my destiny right here for now.